But now I'm excited to bring to the stage two incredible leaders leading the work for health in LA County, in mental health and in aging and disability, and that's Dr. Lisa Wong, who's now the new head of the Department of Mental Health, and Dr. Laura Trejo, who's now the new head of Aging and Disabilities. Thank you so much for joining us. I think I just want to start with a really general question, because a lot of folks may not really know the scope and scale of what you do. Mm-hmm. And it's honestly astonishing. So why don't we start with you, Dr. Trejo, and then we'll go to you, Dr. Wong. But can you just tell us, what is the role of the Department of Aging and Disabilities? What do you do? How do you support health?
Good morning, everybody. Delighted to be here. I was sitting there saying, I think it took me about 35 years to make it to the stage. I'm really excited to have finally made it. Thank you for this opportunity. The Department of Aging and Disabilities is one of the county's newest departments. We actually are going to be about a year old in July, so we're very bright, spanking new. Our mission really is to address the unique needs of one of the largest concentrations of older adults in the United States. Over 2 million older people over the age of 60 reside in Los Angeles County, representing every group you can think of in terms of diversity. I always tell folks, I get to work with the best of the human species, older adults. I work with people who have overcome, who have met challenges and milestones in their lives and are still standing. And so that's one of the most amazing parts of my work, is that I actually get to be part and get to experience the joy of life with older adults. We also have an incredible new mission that our department was given by our Board of Supervisors, which was to really begin to develop programming, infrastructure, and policy to address the unique needs of persons living with disabilities. And so we are very much up to the task. We're very excited about seeing what we can do. When we look at the intersectionality between aging and disability, is very present. About 40% of older adults will experience some type of a disability sometime in their late life. So to me, it becomes an issue of how do we build systems that are truly supportive at the scale of Los Angeles. And so the work that we do is both direct service, everything from providing information to a family member who doesn't know what to do and being there on the phone when they call, to providing activities at one of our 14 community and senior centers, to working with over 70 community partners who we provide funding to, so they can deliver a wide array of services, like I said, all the way from information to legal services, health promotion, transportation. One of our premier programs that probably all of you heard of during the pandemic was our nutrition program, our senior nutrition program. Thank you. As older adults were asked to stay home and became homebound by necessity, we went into high gear. I can tell you, we went from receiving 300 to 400 calls a week to receiving 6,000 a day. As the pandemic settled, the anxiety in our community was greater, and the need for us to respond even more so. So our nutrition programs grew in a magnitude of almost 10 times. And we are incredibly proud of the work that we did to keep people safe and to make them feel that sense of support from our community, from our residents, so that they also didn't feel so isolated. But now, Dr. Wong and I are about to embark, and also with Kristin, on how are we going to address the issues related to social isolation. So that's just a kind of a broad view. Aging is everywhere, because if you look at what an aging older adult or an adult with disability needs, they need everything. And so I consider that to be my job description. Thank you.
Thank you. And I would also recognize, aging is also, for me, aging is also everywhere, in that if I'm lucky enough, yes, I will, at some point, whether I do now or not, either be an older adult or be a person with a disability. So this is really incumbent upon all of us, yes, to support this work. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me here today, Kristin. It's such an honor to be here. For those of you who know me, the arts and culture have been such an important part of my own life, and I'm very thrilled to have this opportunity to bring this together with the Department of Mental Health as well. So the Department of Mental Health is, well, what is not mental health these days, I guess? We are actually the largest public mental health department in the entire country. We have about 6,907 staff and a budget now of $3.2 billion. And we cover the entire county. We are responsible for bringing health and well-being, mental health and well-being to the 10 million residents of Los Angeles County. We have hundreds of different sites where we have clinics and co-located programs. We work out of community-based platforms like the schools and faith-based organizations. We try to be everywhere for everyone because mental health needs are pervasive in our society today. And we've seen that especially during, and through the pandemic. As Kristin mentioned earlier, there's been such a significant rise in mental health needs, especially in the areas of anxiety and depression. And we see that, throughout the age groups, but especially with our children and young adults, we've seen very serious increases in those categories. We've even seen in our outpatient clinics, which, in the past really were for those people with the most serious mental health issues, we've seen growth of 35 to 40% in many of our clinics just during the time of the pandemic. So the need is great because we take care of typically over 250,000 unique clients every year, but we are also involved in depopulating the jails, implementing a Care First Jails Last model. We are, of course, very heavily involved in helping with homelessness throughout our county and work deeply with our people who are unhoused and experiencing serious mental illness. And, there are so many areas where mental health is now. I think it's a very exciting time because our wish has always been for people to recognize how essential mental health is to well-being. We feel mental health is health. But I think something else that doesn't always get talked about is that mental health is also a social justice issue. We see the differences in what people have access to based on their zip code or the occupation they have or the amount of money they have or the country that they come from. And that's something that the Department of Mental Health is very invested in working on. We want to do mental health that not only changes the life trajectory of people living in Los Angeles County, but we want to do it with an equity lens. And I think that we have our job cut out for us. The challenge of having our wish met, that we now have recognition of the importance of mental health, is everything has been coming down to mental health. And so our dance card has been quite full, and we have been struggling not as much with funding lately as much as our human resources, finding the people who have the internal capacity to still do this kind of work despite going through a pandemic themselves, despite personal losses, despite social justice issues, race-based hate crimes, everything else the world is dealing with. We are looking for those special individuals who can still come and give to others and find healing for themselves in providing healing for others. So I think this is a very special point, a very special juncture in the history of the Department of Mental Health, and we're looking forward to what lies ahead. And I think, Kristin, one of the bright shining things out there for us is to be able to partner with you folks, partner with arts and culture throughout the county to bring healing in a different way, right? Because I think traditionally, in terms of contemporary culture, mental health is seen as something measurable, right? We have made it more scientific. We can talk about doing transcranial magnetic interventions. We can talk about doing neurofeedback. We can talk about things we measure, symptoms we change, brain scans. What we don't talk about, though, is our roots. Because when you look at psychology, the roots of psychology were in caring for the soul. caring for the heart. And in fact, in Chinese, in Cantonese, the field of psychology is called Samlai Haka, which basically means the studies having to do with the soul or the heart. So different from, okay, take 100 milligrams of Zoloft and record your PHQ-9 score, right? And I think that when we can focus on the arts and culture, we have a venue to really come back to that spiritual side of people, that side that really looks at the heart and the soul. Yes. And that's where the real healing is.
So powerful, and so many things that resonate, certainly across the audience, and even in my experience in this realm, where even in personal experience, the difference is, and this is a little bit going off script, but my family actually is more medical, my family, than they are artists. And so both my parents worked in medical capacity at the VA hospitals in Chicago and dental services, et cetera. And when I was speaking to my father, who's 88 right now, but he was lamenting to me how much he feels that the medical field has gone astray. Because when it was their turn to need services, he didn't feel a sense of holistic care for the person, a sense of culture. He felt it was just, okay, I'm gonna check a box, yeah, I'm the resident here. And honestly, I think it's so inspiring to hear you say that, and to hear both of you talking about healing and really holistically thinking about what we need, and that arts and culture could be a powerful ally in this work, I think is something to put down for where we need to go for tomorrow, today and tomorrow in this work. So I'm very excited about that. Thank you. So as you do this work and the incredible scale, the incredible amount of need, but there's also opportunity there. So what do you see so far in your work as the role of the arts? Like, how can the arts help advance the health goals that you might have in your agencies?
I'll start because I think I have a list. Even this morning, I was like, okay, add more. The arts to me are a part of the authentic work that we can do with older adults in their experience of where they are in their life journey. And so it's not only healing, but it's also providing meaning. It's providing that sense of connectivity to community, which so often we lose as people age. There's a lot of isolation that occurs. I remember early on in my education, they talked about it as almost being normal, that older people would separate. And we learned better that that was not normal, that was depression, that those were other things that were occurring in the aging process. And so what the arts do is usually bring us back into community. It brings us back to ourselves. It's a way of expressing whatever we're feeling. So in my own work, I'm an alumni of the Department of Mental Health. So I always embraced and appreciated that mental health was so present in using the arts as a healing tool in working with populations. And so that has been something that has informed my own work in understanding the importance that art plays in the well-being of community. As I was sharing with you the other day, one of my favorite things was we had a senior art show. And I know that the LA County Museum is around here somewhere. And we're going to talk about that because I have a plan in terms of really elevating the ability of our senior artists to be seen and to share their work. Their work not only heals them, but it heals us when we experience it. And so to me, the arts have an intrinsic value to the work of those of us in aging. More important, we're also looking at the incredible power of art in the lives of specific target populations that we serve. Persons that are experiencing dementia, persons that may be experiencing different levels of ability in late life. I love it when I see an older adult in a senior center moving to a Zumba beat, and it's somebody post-stroke, and they're having joy, and you see the smile, and they're beaming. And it's not a person that's going to feel like I'm going to go out and dance, but in that moment, they're in community with everybody else. And so to me, that's where I see the power, the healing power of art. And so it's something that's very important. It's always been embedded in almost every aspect of the work that I've done with older people, because personally, I find that art is absolutely essential for a good quality of life. So I've always wanted to see it anywhere that I work and influence how we implement it in community to provide everybody that opportunity. I also think it has incredible power intergenerationally, which we have not begun to really tap. When we bring youth and older people together and the arts are part of it, I was sharing with somebody who walked me upstairs that I remember bringing 300 youth from East LA who had never really been to the Dorothy Chandler before to have an experience with the theater arts folks, and they were doing a workshop on how to be actors and all that, while their grandparents were taking lessons on how to talk to teenagers. And it was a glorious day because we used this incredibly beautiful building as a gathering place. So the art was one of the ways that we were bringing these two generations together, and we were using art as a way of helping these two generations to communicate. So to me, the arts are an incredible, powerful tool. And like I said, we're going to be doing a lot in that space, all of us as a community, because I think that we all need to do that, especially right now, given the level of social isolation. All of us experience the trauma, all of us experience it. Even, I think, makes it even more urgent that we look at art as a way of providing healing to our community. So I'm looking forward to what the next few years are going to bring.
I think for the Department of Mental Health, the role I see for the arts is probably threefold. I think one is healing, two is growth, and three is sustainability. I think in terms of healing, we're all by now pretty familiar with a lot of the empirical support there is for the differences that the arts make in terms of everything from, stress hormones like cortisol to neurotransmitters like serotonin to, stimulating pleasure centers in the brain. I think, though, what we don't realize sometimes is when you're working with people who are struggling with very serious mental illness, like schizophrenia and psychotic disorders, there is so much that is beyond the capacity of language. I remember one young man I worked with who, when he came to me, he was referred. For those of you who don't know, I worked for over 20 years in Skid Row. And he was referred by one of the SRO hotels in Skid Row because he was so malnourished, his hair was falling out in clumps. And so they needed an evaluation for him, they needed to get him some kind of treatment. And he was in his 20s, I think mid-20s at that point. He was fairly nonverbal. We knew just from his history and past hospitalizations that he had a previous diagnosis of schizophrenia. And to walk across a 10 by 10 room would take him about 10 minutes just to walk across. He had such psychomotor retardation. So I was not sure what I was going to do with this young man at first. I had his records to go by, but really no speech from him. So one of the psychological tests I really liked to use was a projective drawing test called House Tree Person. So I thought, okay, maybe we can just start there. It doesn't require language or anything. So I had him do a house tree person. And it was amazing how much those projective drawings told me. And also the fact that he so willingly engaged in that, even though he wasn't speaking, he had, such difficulty with movement. And every session, we would basically just sit down and draw. He would draw, I would draw. He started to say, "Hello, doctor," like at the beginning. I would talk to him a little bit throughout and told him he didn't have to answer. And, as we started that way, it started to bring out for him things in his drawings that then we would discuss. Well, I would discuss, I guess he was listening. But it helped him to reconnect with himself, to be able to identify those things that he was not able to put words to. And this was a gentleman who was just about eight years early was senior class president, and just a few years earlier was a college sophomore at UCLA. So you can imagine the tremendous trauma and loss somebody like that experiences with the onset of a very cruel disease like schizophrenia. But we were able to work through that and use art as healing. And by the end of our time together, he was no longer homeless. He was living in a very nice apartment in a nice neighborhood. He went back to school, and he was drawing cartoons for the school newspaper. So I think, beyond the brain waves you measure, beyond the brain scans where you could see the glucose metabolism happening, you see how art impacts life. So that's in terms of healing. And I think in terms of growth, Robert Lifton studied a lot about people who survived extreme traumas, like Nagasaki, Hiroshima, things like that. And he found that the way people were able to not just survive, but to have some level of mastery and transcend that survival experience was to reestablish a sense of connectedness, symbolic integrity, and movement. And I think that is another way where the arts can really come into usefulness for us, for people to go beyond just an amelioration of symptoms or having a stable place to live. But what then, right? Like, I would often get somebody who had paranoia and psychosis, like schizophrenia, and once we kind of stabilize that, we do psychological testing again, and the scale that shot up, depression. And I think this is where we need to focus on getting people beyond that survival experience. How can they be on a different trajectory? It's like what Thomas Merton once said, that art enables us to simultaneously find ourselves and lose ourselves. And so I've seen ways in which we can use that to get people to connect not just to others, but even to themselves in the case of serious mental illness. Then in terms of sustainability, I think it's very important for us to support the health and well-being of our staff. If I'm going to be able to work and help heal the people struggling in Los Angeles County, I need healthy staff to work with them. And by bringing in, I think, the arts, that's one way that we can help nourish the souls of the healers and build some sustainability in what we do.
Yes, I can see it now also, because I feel like this is a refrain that I have been hearing from leaders in the arts as well as in other disciplines, really actually wanting to hold on to the arts as a means of actually shifting the culture within their organization, having the healing for the staff. So it's an incredibly powerful vision for us to think about what would that culture shift look like if we were able to do that all across Los Angeles County, all across all of the organizations, all across the arts field even, so that folks really could sustain and build that work. So incredible. I want to pick up on something that came up a little bit earlier for both of you. Can you tell us a little bit about just the role of art in your personal life? At what point did you ever experience the arts, participate in the arts? How have you kind of seen it firsthand?
I'll start. As I was sharing with Kristin, I said, the arts are embedded into who I am. I was sharing to her a small story. I said, I moved to a new house and I refused to put nails all over my walls, so I left all my art stored. And I felt anxiety for about a month and a half, and I didn't know where it was coming from. I knew work was fine, home was fine, and I couldn't figure out where this stress was coming from. And then one night, in the middle of the night, I had an aha moment, and it was my art was not visible. And it helps to calm me. It obviously had a deep impact in that it was creating anxiety. So in the middle of the night, I started hammering all over my house, putting up all my paintings, because I felt the level of calmness and stillness that I was missing. To me, art is part of who I am. I literally, if you go to my desk right now, you will see art projects on one side of the table and my laptops and my computers for work on the other, and they coexist. I don't know how to make them not be part of the same space, because to me, color, shape, ability to physically engage in doing that has always been part of what I do. When I was in graduate school, I was going to graduate school and I was working in a flower shop. And I did that deliberately because to me, it was about color, shape, the artistry of creating beautiful arrangements that I needed in order for me to feel very grounded in the work that I needed to do to study everything about the aging process. And so to me, art has always been a balancing force that creates that opportunity for me to be centered and to be as highly productive as I know how to be. So it's highly critical to my wellness overall. So that's what art does for me.
My father's a photographer. My sister's a photographer. So I guess art has been a part of my life since I was very young. I didn't know that not everybody grew up that way, going to museums and, going to musical performances. I remember my father taking me to see the Philharmonic when I was still a toddler. It was like one of my early memories, going to performances of the Philharmonic, going to the opera, things like that. And I think it's played such an important role in my life in terms of broadening my perspective, but also in terms of being able to share it with others who it never, like I said, it never occurred to me that not everybody had this kind of exposure. And, I think that brings up something really important, is that sometimes, we aren't even cognizant of the impact something has on us, or we may not realize the impact it has on somebody else. And it makes me think about how important it is to invest in exposing our youngest children to the arts. And I remember there were times when I would take my oldest son, and Cody, I have 4 boys, and I would take the oldest one to every art opening that we would go to, and he would do crazy things, like he was a toddler at the time, but he would like point at something and say, "That's by Old Man Moses," and he meant Ed Moses. or he'd like go up to a Cindy Sherman piece and say, "Is that a booger in his nose?" Or like sometimes I'd come home and it'd be in the afternoon, and he and my husband, I remember he was like 3, they were in their underwear dancing wildly to Baba Mal. So I think that even when you don't think you're getting through to children, something really seeps in, because then later I was visiting him when he was in college in New York, and his friends told me, we love that Cody drags us to performances at the museums and everything. And I was thinking, I'm kind of like, this must be sort of a drag for him that I'm taking to, to all these things. But it really, something seeped in. And I think it's the same thing with people in mental health who need our help. Kristin and I had shared with you that a friend of mine, Vijay Gupta, who used to be with the Phil, he and I got together in Skid Row, and we decided to do a classical music concert in the basement of the Skid Row Clinic, which I guess, people thought we were crazy at the time and were doing that. They're like, no, your clients are not interested in classical music. They've not been exposed. They're going to be bored to death, whatever, right? But at the finish of this brilliant Beethoven piece that Vijay and a few of his friends played, one unhoused gentleman with serious mental illness who had never really been in classical music in his life, just spontaneously stood up and high-fived Vijay from the front row. And I think it shows that we can't underestimate the power of things that we don't know.
Beautiful.
Yeah, beautiful. Amazing. So we've talked a little bit in various ways about the importance of equity, what we might call equity sort of in this work. But I want to put, a little bit more attention on that. Can you just speak from your, respective lenses? What are some of the ways that you're thinking about advancing equity, or how does this show up in your work that, then really apply to all of us?
Part of the work that we do at Aging and Disabilities is really look at how are we involved with our community partners. Who are the folks that are not at our table that we need to be identifying and bringing together? A lot of the work right now for us is identification, so that we can begin to build those networks. Building those partnerships takes time. One of the ones that I'm most proud of right now took us 10 years to build a very solid partnership with the Independent Living Centers of Los Angeles. And you have to take your time. Sometimes when you're trying to introduce yourself to a new network, you have to put your time in building those trusting relationships so that you can then move forward and build new possibilities for our community. One of the things we're incredibly proud of, we were just designated as an emerging aging and disability resource collaborative for California, which will bring together these 2 networks for the first time to start really visioning together, how do we improve the health of Los Angeles? And so To me, looking at equity is looking at people that are not here right now. Where are they? How do I find them? How do I take that risk of reaching out and saying, you know, I can tell you with this group for 10 years, for a couple of times they would just say, you need to leave now. We're not prepared to continue to have these discussions. And what you need to be able to be good about and say, okay, but I'll be back. And be open about being back, that it wasn't I never want to see you again. It's right now it's not working. And so a lot of the work that we're doing with new communities, for me in aging in particular, we're having immigrant communities that are experiencing their own aging process for the first time in large numbers, which means they may not even have language to be able to communicate in their own native experience, because the concepts are very Western based in terms of the development of the science of aging. So I walk into rooms where people whisper words that are not said in public to each other. I'll give you an example. Years ago, I was working with colleagues in the Japanese community. They only had a word that was equivalent to being insane to communicate that somebody was having a cognitive impairment like Alzheimer's. So they would never say that out loud to somebody. It would be so offensive. And then President Reagan wrote his letter to the nation expressing that he was having Alzheimer's, and it became president's disease. In that moment, we changed the language of a community to be able to discuss openly Alzheimer's disease and not offend each other. So to me, that is also part of the joy, the excitement, and also part of the challenge, is that we're actually working with communities that are having to develop conceptually how to express aging, how do they feel about it, what are they going to do about it. But it's also an incredibly welcoming place because older people represent grounding in communities. And so for us, older adults represent strength. And so we walk in with that to be able to then have an opportunity to discuss with communities how are they going to experience that on aging and be open to learning about it. So to me, equity is staying open to understanding that not everybody's here, that we do have to do the work of outreach, inviting, developing that trust, and also being willing to be very uncomfortable. I always say, you know, half the time I'm going to get it right, half the time I'm going to get it wrong, but I work for the half I get it right. And the rest I learn from, so that I constantly I'm sort of revitalizing my abilities to be a better advocate, to be a better person that says, stand next to me, we're going to do this together. And so to me, that's what equity inclusion means, is that you have to be very sincere and authentic about understanding the diversity of Los Angeles and knowing that it's going to be very challenging, sometimes very difficult, but it's absolutely worthwhile every moment, because when you see one older person receiving those services, receiving the support, smiling at you, I always go looking for my sample of one every time I have found them. And part of it is because I need to know that what we're doing matters to at least one person, then the effort is worthwhile. And in Los Angeles, because we work in such large scales, you heard Dr. Wong saying the largest mental health agency in the country, it can be very daunting for us as leaders to be reminded of the incredible power of the offices that we sit in. And so, but that's also why we do this, because it's really an incredible opportunity to give back and to really be of service at its most basic level. Thank you.
I think when I think about equity in terms of what we're trying to accomplish, I think of it in terms of course, I think access, also choice and voice. So access, choice, and voice, that's what equity, you know, that's how equity is being rolled out for us. I mean, first of all, you know, in terms of access, not just geographical access in various neighborhoods, especially underserved neighborhoods, but also access in terms of language need, cultural responsiveness. I think, you know, what makes something accessible to people, and what are we giving them access to? You know, when I was in Skid Row, one of my main sort of themes was I want to give people access to the type of service my private practice clients would have. You know, the best. People with no choices should be able to choose here amongst the best, right? So I really want to increase access for people who don't have resources to things like transcranial magnetic stimulation, to interventions like neurofeedback that they couldn't get if they didn't have money outside in the community. Also, I think it's about having choice. It's not about me saying, oh, well, the research says transcranial magnetic stimulation can have this kind of impact in 8 sessions, and so you should do it because you have depression. It's about what resonates with them, what is meaningful within their culture, within their experience, within what their value system is. So having the ability to make choices and not just being, given, a set course. Then I think ultimately equity really comes down to giving voice to. I think we can't just say, oh, we're working with various communities, we're rolling out all these culturally and linguistically responsive interventions. We have to listen to the people we're trying to serve. We have to listen to them in their voice, in their language, and be a vehicle to amplify that, to advocate for the kind of resources that are needed and wanted. So I think, basically that's it, is access, choice, and voice.
Giving it up for Dr. Wong. We're about to close this session. There's so many things I would love to talk to you both about, and we've started many partnerships that I'm excited to grow. We've placed a creative strategist artist in residence in both of these departments. I'm excited to hear about that, and you all actually will hear a little bit about one of those residencies today. But I will close with just briefly, we're here to uplift the power of the arts in all of this, but from where you sit, what do you see as sort of where we can go? What we could do more together that we couldn't do separately? Just in your mind, is there something that's really a big opportunity or a big need that you see arts and health should address as we close?
Well, for me, this morning you and I were exploring the LA County's about to issue a strategic plan for brain health. And so to me, that is we're looking for all the different initiatives. Where are the opportunities to embed? As you shared with me, you were one of the leaders that embedded a lot of the art language into our Purposeful Aging, Age-Friendly initiative. And we just got redesignated for an additional 5 years. So I am looking at scale. Where are the opportunities to influence and that we permeate the arts into everything that we do, as opposed to it's out here, it's an art program. No, I want it to become part of everything that we do. So that's where I'm so excited about this opportunity for us to collaborate on a different level. I love that our city partners are here because I worked well when I worked for the City of LA with our Cultural Affairs Department, and I'm just looking forward to really looking at a regional approach. I think that's where the opportunity lies. How do we do regional work on behalf of the populations we serve? So I'm looking forward and excited to do that.
Yes.
Ditto what Laura said. Really, I think to have that type of integration where it's not just a new pilot project or a one-off, but really where the arts is integrated into what we do, it's the norm, it's not a special kind of program. And then for our investment to follow that. If we value this, let's invest in this. We need to put the dollars behind it. I think we can't just depend on well-intentioned, generous volunteers. I think we have to put our money where our mouth is if we're going to value the arts and in health and well-being. And I think also it's very important to build a bi-directional community integration. A lot of times we talk about our goal for our clients is to be integrated in the community or reintegrated into a community. But I want the community to be integrated with us too. So not just our people going out there and participating, but for the community at large to come in and get to know us and participate, in our house too. So I think bi-directional integration is really important.
I love it. Okay, you heard it here first. We're going to go for... And I will close by just saying this is something that I am also experiencing and seeing, and in conversations all across the arts field, is that we've had incredible pilot programs, we've had incredible community-based efforts that we're now trying to build, and we've had incredible one-time funding, from pandemic funding to Creative Corps from the state of California, et cetera. Where do we go from here in terms of scaling this work, making it sustainable, ensuring community is engaged, and making sure the investment and the dollars are behind it so that arts is not a nice to have. This is part of our health. Woo!
Yeah.
All right, so we will close there. And thank you so much. Please give a huge round of applause for these incredible leaders taking their time to be with us today. Thank you.
Thank you. It was awesome.